Hello, welcome. This is Robert Wilburn from Archive Social. Again, welcome to the webinar. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So the topic for today's webinar is the School District's Guide to Social Media Records, or as we say here, what could possibly go wrong. Excuse me. So about Archive Social and why we're presenting this webinar today. This is actually a presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago to the Michigan Association of School Boards for their training, and it was a collection of school boards and superintendents. And in giving this presentation, we got a lot of positive feedback, and it made me think that this is something that would be interesting to present nationally. And so what we wanted to do is turn around and do that. So this is very much an educational presentation. It's not a product pitch, etc. So about Archive Social in general and why we're here today. So as we put here on the screen, we're the leading provider of social media archiving for education and government. And what that means is we work with more than 1,000 agencies around the country, everything from school districts to city, county government, law enforcement. We work with small towns up to the largest cities like New York City, Chicago, etc. Within the education realm, we're also partnered with NSPRA. So for those of you all that are on the communicator side of the school district, you'll be familiar with NSPRA. And so for the last 3 or 4 months, we've been partnered with them to provide educational offerings around particularly this issue of social media archiving. So about once a quarter, we're working with them on delivering something. So, and then the one other thing that we've done in this past year that I think is of interest nationally is in January, a year ago, the outgoing Obama administration recognized the need to archive its social media from the past 8 years. And so we were selected by the Obama White House to essentially create that archive of all of their accounts. And so that's public. We have a link to it here at this archivesocial.com/White House. And if you go to that page, you can see the social media archive and link to it. And it's interesting. You can go back and search on the archive. So, okay. So that's kind of who we are. The value of that is we get to talk to a lot of school districts around the country every day about these issues and about how they're using social media. And so what I'd like to do today is really focus on 3 things. So explore social media as public record and specifically the impact for school districts. What does that mean? Secondly, review the unique challenges of social media records retention. And then thirdly, how social media archiving helps your school districts, because there's a couple of very specific use cases that are unique for school districts and how you use social media and how you're set up as opposed to other types of government organizations. And then finally, we'll have a time of Q&A. Now, feel free as we go along to enter questions. And the way you do that is on the right, you'll see a control panel. And there's a tab there that says questions. And what you can do is type in a question. And you can either select send to moderators or send to all. And that'll just dictate whether it just goes to us privately or to the group. And some of those questions we'll address as we go along. And probably most of them we'll address at the end. But definitely put them in as we go along. Okay, so just before we jump into this idea of social media as public record, I just want to do a quick poll, and let's go ahead and publish that. And it's about what aspect of your social media are you most concerned with? So go ahead and select one of those. And again, there's other items we could put here. These are just 4 that we decided on. Okay, great. And we have most of the audience has responded. So Will, do you want to publish that? Perfect. Okay, so we get a look at the results. So comment moderation, 36%. So that's everything from essentially moderating what users and your constituents are posting on the accounts. Understanding what's actually getting posted. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the challenges of school districts being the decentralization of who actually owns your accounts. So I talked to a lot of communicators around the country, and they'll say, hey, we actually don't even know what's getting posted on our accounts. Again, not meaning the official school district page, but club pages, school pages, etc. Staff use on or of personal accounts. That's a huge issue for schools right now. Again, like we hear that all around the country. I think school systems are grappling with what should our policy be for staff members' use of social media in a personal and professional capability. Potential lawsuits, 22%. So that could be anything from activity on your pages to obviously a hot button issue for school systems around the country. And there's just some recent cases in the last couple of weeks, issues where school districts are punishing students for activity on the student's personal page. So maybe a student likes something or posts something, and then the school district is disciplining the student. And if you're aware of this issue, you know that this is something that's been big over the last 2 years all around the country. Okay, so great, thanks for that, Will. So that's just a good piece of context here. So let's jump into this issue of social media as public record. So the world we live in, most school districts are using social media now more than ever before. So in fact, I don't think I've ever heard a school district say we're using social media less than we were 2 years ago. It's a mission critical part of your communication strategy. And you guys know as well as we do that it's really the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in terms of highlighting the good, because sometimes we can focus on the negative of social media, this is a great story. I excerpted something here. This is from Van School District, Independent School District in Texas. I'm not sure if we have people from Texas on the webinar today that are familiar with this. It's a great story. It's a school district where more than 50% of the students come from economically disadvantaged homes. And so the school district wanted to really encourage people to finish high school and go to college. So what they did is after the high school students graduated or received their diplomas, they then took them on buses to elementary and junior high schools in the area and in the school district. And they basically have this parade through the school. So all the younger kids come out, and you can see, or not as much a parade as a procession, and the students come through. And it was a great story. They ended up being on Time Magazine, or sorry, not the Today Show. Ended up doing a piece on them. And what I love about this is, in terms of social media and how that plays into this, is what we've seen is there's been now a bunch of school districts that have done this same thing. And the way that they heard about it was social media. And in fact, I don't think Van was the school district that originated this. If I understand the story right, I think they actually saw this from another school district. So again, social media can be a great way of promoting the great stories in the school district. Here's another, just a couple pictures here. Okay, the bad, and I don't need to go into this. You guys probably see this every day in your jobs. Inappropriate comments. You know, one of the big issues right now is cyberbullying, not just of other students, but of teachers. So students are posting things about teachers and administrators, and then kind of neutral, not necessarily negative, but just misinformation. Stuff gets posted on social media, it's incorrect information, and then the school is scrambling to correct it. And then finally, the ugly, and this is just a recent lawsuit, and again, these are all around the country, but just we see all kinds of stuff on social media, right? And so this was a sheriff's office where somebody had criticized the sheriff, and the sheriff, the accusation was that fictitious accounts were used to then attack the person that had criticized the sheriff. I use this article just because it's publicly available. We have a lot of stories from our customers that obviously we just can't share publicly. So all of that to say, social media is good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a phenomenal communication tool. Communicators are doing phenomenal things with it. There's also, unfortunately, some bad and some ugly that goes with it. You will never have as little social engagement on social media as you have right now today. So all of that is just going to expand in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, within school districts, as we start to tie this into social media records requirements, school districts have a unique challenge that we don't see in other segments, and it's your decentralized environments. So typically, if you're another government agency, a lot of times everybody's housed in one building that's owning the social media. Whereas when you're in a school district, you might have your district Facebook and Twitter, and I just use those as examples. We could add Instagram, whatever. You then have your official school Facebook and Twitter accounts. And then you have all of these unofficial accounts, right? These could be clubs, they could be run by PTA, all kinds of sports teams, right? All kinds of different accounts. And so when you're trying to manage a district social media presence, you just have this incredibly decentralized environment. So what does this mean for your public records responsibilities? Every state across the country has a public records law that says something like this, like we have on the screen. Here we talk about public records includes any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. So this one happens to be from California. Again, every state has it. Typically, these were written, as many of you are probably aware, decades ago. Before there was email, before there was social media, et cetera. But this is the underlying requirement and philosophy of the public records law. And then often, many states has additional guidance. So here's an example, again, continuing from California, from their e-records guidebook. A plan to export records from a social media site to a record-keeping system is important and should be created in collaboration with an agency's IT department. Now, I want to be clear, not every state has specific social media guidance, but what we're seeing around the country is when states don't have guidance, what typically happens is lawsuits happen, and then that forces the guidance. So we have yet to see a state that has come out and declared that social media is not public record. So school districts are within this public realm and have the same public records responsibilities as other government agencies, so city, county government, law enforcement, et cetera. So example of social media public records for schools. So they could be everything from this top example here. This is a school district down in Washington saying, hey, students of the following schools are going to be held inside. It's basically information. Well, this could become record or is record if it's uniquely posted there. I know as a parent of a 5-year-old, when I need to get information about the schools, I basically go to the school's Twitter accounts to get the info. So that's one type of record. There's another one here on the left, this Hillsborough School District. There was an issue where they were being accused of banning Santa. And so they went on social media to clarify that they were in fact not banning Santa and trying to explain it. And then the bottom right, this is from about a year ago. There was this, excuse me, creepy clown threats around the country. I think it was actually maybe 7 or 8 states where school districts were getting this and people were posting. One state, it was a 12-year-old that was posting and reposting this. And so basically saying, in this case, threatening, making a threat against particular schools. And so again, just an example of something that just an example of something where it can become public record when you, particularly in this case with a threat. Okay. All right. So any conversation that you have on social media, it's no different than on email. The one big difference, though, is that the other party can go in and delete their portion of the conversation at any time. So think about that. Think about all the conversations you have on email and the crucial conversations. And you know that you've got those backed up and archived. But imagine somebody could go in at any point and delete their half of the conversation, and it just removes the context. So this gets to a really important point. Public records are not just your posts. It's not just your content, but it's user-generated content. And this is what makes social media really unique. So I've got an example here on the right where a parent went on a social media site for a school and said, my son has been dealing with bullies for a while. Now that he's stood up for himself, he's being referred to for a hearing to determine if he has to go to an alternative school. The other child hit my son first. And this was a parent that basically went, as you see at the beginning of the post, went to the news, very frustrated, posted on the school social media site, went to the news outlet. The school then responded and said, hey, essentially saying, we hear you. We'd like to be able to take this offline in accordance with their policy, and asked, would you be able to send us a direct message with your contact information? And then what happens is you have these types of threads that go back and forth. In many instances, you're going to have upset parents who then are going to complain, well, my child was bullied and you guys never did anything about it. I complained about it and you never did anything about it. So here's a great example of a record where a school could say, actually, we have this record where we heard we saw your post, we responded here the next day, even if the parent deletes this from social media, because maybe the parent decides, I want to sue the school district, and I'm just going to delete the post because I don't want that to be evidence there, but the school district would have it. So again, the idea is public records, not just your posts, but the back and forth that you have with users. Now, is everything on social media public record? Absolutely not. So we're not saying everything on social media is public record, but a lot of it is, and you don't know until it happens. And again, a lot of it is user generated, which is what's different from a lot of other mediums. So public records requests, and I don't know how many of you have been on the receiving end of public records requests, but as you know, it's some type of language like any and all documents relating to all the reports, all notifications, all emails and communications, etc. That includes social media. So that's not just email, that's all communications, and again, includes social media. And we've got a number of case studies online and we'll include one in the follow-up email. We'll do a link to the one on the top left here that we have, and it just is an example. Okay, so one of the things I want to do with this session is talk about real cases or situations that we're seeing around the country. Unless the situation has been publicly mentioned in the press and described, we're not going to use actual school district names. So this first one was around records requests for hidden content. So this is school district South Florida, fairly recently, just 2 months ago, received a records request from a citizen for all deleted and hidden content. So again, official records requests, all deleted and hidden content on their Facebook page dating back to 2015. They were unable to fulfill this request, and this is actually when they had gotten in touch with us to start archiving. So they were able to get hidden content, which you can go back with an archiving system and get retroactively. You can't get the deleted content. This is still playing out, though, because, again, they were not able to effectively respond to the records request because of the deleted content, because, again, just to clarify, because they did not have a system in place before November. Another one, records request for deleted content. Comments on a Facebook page, there was basically a fight between two parents. One of the parents deleted her side of the argument. The other parent put in a records request for the full conversation. Said, hey, this is the school district page. This is public record. I'd like to see it. And again, this happens a lot where people post something. It's like road rage, except on social media. Then they suddenly say, hey, wow, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And they either edit it or delete it. Recently, there was there's a school district in Virginia, and this was kind of a scary thing. A student posted a bomb threat on his personal Facebook page, and another student shared it with the school through private messaging. And this is something we hear from schools happens quite a bit, where a student will post something potentially dangerous, inappropriate on a private account. Another student school will see it, will take a snapshot of it, and will private message to the school through it. So then in this case, the school district shared the private message with local law enforcement and was able to get the situation dealt with. The important thing here is if the student had deleted, had a change of heart, hey, and we see this a lot with law enforcement with crime tips, But if the student had had a change of heart and had then deleted it, the school would no longer have that record. So again, in this type of internal investigation, this was not a public records request. It was an internal investigation. This is where it's helpful to have some type of archiving. Okay, and where you're going to have records. Okay, so when does social media records matter? Interactions with parents and students, safety and emergency situations, right? That's a huge thing for schools, school closures, and just general announcements. Again, there's other categories. These are some of the big buckets that we see. And again, if there's any comments or clarifications. Okay, so 3 areas, and again, if you have questions as we go along, definitely feel free to jump in and post those. So 3 areas that we're seeing agencies get in trouble with social media records. The first is violating or perceiving to violate First Amendment rights. And this is a huge issue around the country, not just with school districts, but again, city, county government, law enforcement. But we're definitely seeing a lot. There was recently a case, I think, I forget starts with an A, I'm forgetting the name of the school in California, just a month or 2 ago that had a big court case around this. But it's around, sometimes it can be around deleted and hidden content, but often it's just around First Amendment rights. So again, one example of that we see that's somewhat unique to school districts is this idea of student posts or like something that the school deems inappropriate or threatening on a non-district or school page. So on a personal page, the school becomes aware of it and decides to punish the student. Another example of this is where it actually happens on the school's page or pages, and the school decides to delete or hide it. So maybe something happens and a parent posts something that's critical of the principal, and this principal's terrible or something like that. The school says, hey, we don't want to actually have that on our page, takes it down. Well, in a lot of instances, what we're seeing around the country is the courts are saying, you know what, you're actually violating, or certainly there's lawsuits claiming to violate First Amendment rights, and we're seeing that there's a lot of times actually what ends up happening is it just gets settled. It often doesn't go to a resolution or to a ruling. Okay, so First Amendment rights, huge, deleting content, blocking users. I'm going to skip these. Big issue with public officials in a ton of states right now. You may have seen this. We have senior officials, mayors, governors, senators being sued for blocking critics. In school districts, again, you have some officials, and I recently got this question around a superintendent's private account. Is that public record? And what we're seeing around the country with public officials is if that person's conducting public business on the private account, then yes, it's considered public record. So if your superintendent has a private Twitter account, but is clearly using it to conduct public business, then you need to think about it as public record. Quick note on social media comment moderation. It's really important to have a policy. We actually have a template. We'll send that out in the follow-up email. We pulled on or drew on a number of school districts that we worked with to come up with a sort of an aggregate policy. These don't have to be really long. And here, what I'm talking about is particularly your public-facing policy. There's a ton of work being done with school districts on internal social media policy for staff members. And in fact, we've been, for those of you all that are in the states Neola works with or work with Neola, we've been working closely with them as they're getting ready to launch their sort of first official social media policy for school districts. It's a huge issue. Should teachers be on Facebook, or should teachers have a classroom Facebook page? Questions like that. But you're just talking about your own pages. Have a policy, post it publicly, and there's some best practices there on how to do that, and then moderate consistency. The biggest area that people get into trouble with is they're inconsistent in their moderation. And again, you guys have a big challenge because you have a lot of people moderating pages that are not district staff. So again, we'll send out some resources. We also have a comment moderation guide, which is a flow chart that again came from some different groups, public agencies, and we asked them if we could kind of package it up and offer it out, and they agreed. And it's a great little flow chart on how to determine if you should moderate a piece of content, particularly from users. Okay, secondly, area that school districts are getting in trouble, not being prepared for increased scrutiny. So as social media is becoming more crucial to what you do, more and more eyes are on it. So 2-3 years ago, maybe there weren't a lot of eyes on it. But now, if you have a big incident, one of the first things that reporters are very savvy now about public records laws and records requests, but one of the first things reporters, parents, even to some degree students, stakeholders, right, like your school board, if they want to know how you handled something, they're going to ask you, hey, how did you respond? Like, if we got a lot of complaints because there were school closures during this snow emergency, or there was not. You guys decided not to close schools or changed it at the last minute, whatever. How did you guys communicate out? We have a bunch of people in the community that are saying you didn't do your job on social media. So increased scrutiny. User-generated content can lead to viral events. And this is something everybody thinks. There's kind of two buckets of agencies or school districts. There's the people that have had a viral event, and viral is relative, right? It doesn't have to be national with millions. It could be of views. It could be, within your area, but 100,000 views. But there's two buckets. So there's people that have had a viral event, and then there's another bucket of people that think, oh, it will never happen to me. And what we just see is again and again, it does happen because, again, you can't control what users post. And what's crazy, I'm going to share a story in a second, that a lot of times it's stuff that starts outside of your social media and then gets pulled onto your social media. So here's a really interesting case study I want to share. So this was recently, in 2016, in Pennsylvania. And so what happened is there was a young African-American girl you see her picture on the screen there, and she started a campaign. It was a really cool idea. She wanted to have a book campaign featuring books that had as the protagonist African-Americans. And she just had noticed that the books in her local school library didn't have a lot of African-American characters. So anyway, so started this great campaign, went national, was on eventually on Ellen, the talk show, to talk about it. So anyway, this is all going great. Then what happens is a district employee makes racist comments about her in the campaign on her personal Facebook page. And you can see it's kind of pasted about halfway down the screen, and just, kind of racist comments. So then what happens is, you can imagine, was the school district pages, this gets picked up. It wasn't in the news at first. It was just on different social media forums. And you see at the post here at the top, you have somebody that says, at DASD schools, this is what your employee Sarah Wilcox had to say about Marley Diaz, and he started this hashtag, Fire Sarah. And so, include this hashtag. I don't think this fellow actually had started the hashtag. So anyway, becomes a big deal on social media, and I heard the communicator talking about this, where she kind of realized a couple days into it. This was actually, if any of you went to the NSPRA conference in San Antonio last year, she talked. The communicator for this district talked about it, and she went to the superintendent and said, "Hey, I really think we ought to address this." And at the time, he said, "No, just don't worry about it." So then what happens is they started having posts from around the world. So you can read this post here. "I never wish death on anyone. First time for anything. She's disgusting, ... She needs to be fired." So again, from all around the world, you'll see here from Germany, Peru, Alaska. And this is, not a huge township in Pennsylvania. Here's the kicker on this. This was a fake identity. This person didn't actually exist. Somebody had created an identity, this person, Sarah Wilcox, who it turned out had been somebody who had recently graduated from Villanova, was in the area, said she worked at the district. Turns out, it was not actually her, and B, even if they'd stolen her name, she didn't actually work at the district. And so you'll see here that the first post was, I think, that I showed was January 31, and again, that wasn't the actual first post in the situation, but one we looked at there. And then you see here the school on February 8th, they did their investigation, they worked with law enforcement, and figured this out, and then clarified this on Twitter. So all of this to say, you can go viral for stuff that you just would never imagine or never expect. Okay, third area, and we're kind of about 3/4 of the way through here, so we're moving on. I'm going to get to social media archiving here in just a second, and then we'll wrap up. So the third area, not being able to produce social media records. So San Mateo recently had a settlement. Basically what had happened is somebody had gone to the police department. There were kind of two things going on. There was the police department, some things with their direct messages on Twitter, and then the mayor of San Mateo had been blocking people on his Twitter account. And so what happened then was the individual gave a public records request, submitted a public records request. The police department responded and said, actually, you know what, we've been hacked, and we can't actually produce these deleted direct messages. And so then she kind of came back and said, hey, actually, there's a bigger issue here. You guys don't even have a policy for preserving your social media records. And so that, and then there was also an issue wrapped into it around the mayor blocking people on his Twitter account. And so finally, they reached this agreement, and this was back in May, that essentially San Mateo would update its policy, they would start archiving, unblock, et cetera. And there's actually kind of a funny post from the mayor after he did that. So what does that all mean? What it means is that school districts, you've got to be able to produce social media records. You're using the social media in mission critical ways. You have users and school personnel that are moderating content. They're deleting records, they're editing records. And again, you have user generated content, and you have this potential to go viral. You have more scrutiny on your social media than you've ever had before. So it really creates an inevitable need to produce social media records. Now, again, these might not be public records requests, but when we talk to school districts, it's frequently, sometimes it's public records requests, but it's frequently a stakeholder that says, hey, I really need to see how we dealt with this situation, or I need to see the full thread here for a particular conversation. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about social media records management and why it's so hard. We've talked about how it's dynamic, it's outside of your control, it happens quickly, people post things then delete. The social networks cannot be relied on for records, and this is the biggest misunderstanding. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. You cannot rely on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, et cetera, for your records. Virtually impossible to search through the history, and what you see on the screen is only part of the story in a conversation. And again, we've talked a little bit about how users are deleting, modifying records. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with it, but you'll see just here's an example or an illustration. People post things. This Trailblazer 64 calls out someone, the Great Jackson. The Great Jackson says, whoa, why are you putting my name out there? Trailblazer says, that probably wasn't the best idea, I'm going to edit it. And then the Great Jackson deletes his or her content. So the social network at the end, what you're seeing is just this, what's on the screen, but there actually was a whole lot more to the conversation. Now, one thing we get frequently is, hey, this doesn't really apply to us because all of our social media is one way. We've made it one-way communication, or schools will say, why can't we just change it moving forward to be one-way communication? And the answer is, despite what you may hear, there's really no true way to turn off user engagement. social media networks are built for two-way or multi-way communication. So Facebook, you can disable people from posting on your page. That is true, but you can't disable their ability to comment on your posts. Twitter, anyone can mention you in a tweet or reply to something you've tweeted. Instagram, you have the ability to hide inappropriate comments. That's true, but you can't broadly block people from commenting. So the bottom line, there's no way to consistently block users from generating content on your social media pages. So, and again, we're going to talk about why social networks, you can't rely on the social networks to archive your records. And here's why. And again, we're going into a little bit of detail here, but I think it's important. Social networks do not provide user commentary. So you're not going to get the user comments on Facebook if you try to download your data. The social networks do not provide revisions to content. So users on the social networks, again, editing, deleting, hiding content, when you use the download your data features, you're not getting this information. You're just getting a snapshot of what's still there on the network. Social networks have downtime, which can result in loss of records. And ultimately, social networks are private businesses. There is no legal obligation for Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, to archive content for public records or for records requests. They have no public records responsibilities, and they've made that clear again and again. And if you actually go on Facebook and look at what's involved with if you have to go to them and ask for records, because occasionally, like police departments will tell us kind of what they've had to go through. It's very, very involved, and ultimately can involve subpoenas. They're just not built for it. And as we see here, this is a state records analyst from the state of Arizona on the top right, or the right here, basically came out and said his guidance was Facebook has no records management capability. Quick point on deleted records. So we did a study last July of 500 of our customers and basically wanted to see how many deleted records did they have. Again, this could be records you delete. This could be records that your users delete on your networks. Well, we found 214,000, so an average of 400 deleted records each month, or in that particular month from each of the customers. And that's a massive number. And again, this is a range of large cities to small towns. And as we put here, 95% of customers experience deletions. So again, like you have deletions, and you probably have more than you expect. Dynamic media, that's another part that's really difficult. A lot of school districts are using Facebook Live now or something like this to everything from promoting or streaming particular school events to school board meetings. We've seen some people do this on school board meetings because they say, hey, we do a school board meeting, we get 50 people. We do it on 50 people in person. We do it on Facebook Live, and now we've got a couple hundred. So that's a challenge, right? In terms of how do you archive or how do you keep those records when you're doing Facebook Live? People are commenting and responding while the video is live, and you're not going to have those on the social media network on Facebook. Okay, so now I want to wrap up with just a quick section on the benefits of social media archiving. And again, we'll have some Q&A at the end, and please ask questions if you have them. The social media archiving. And I should take a step back because sometimes we talk about it and assume everyone knows what that means. Social media archiving for us, it's a cloud-based solution where your accounts are hooked up and you connect your accounts, and we're basically archiving the activity on those accounts. And we can talk in more detail about it, but just to make sure everybody understands that's what it is. So what are the benefits? Number one, most important thing, ensure compliance and easily respond to records requests. So you want to be compliant with your state public records law. That's just a risk management. You want to make sure you're not the school district that gets sued because you don't have your records requests. I think even more than that for school districts, and that's a key core point, it's this idea of being able to respond to all records requests. You have a threat against a school. You have an altercation among parents like we talked about. You have a school board request for how you responded to a certain situation. we have schools that are in crisis situations. Maybe we have a webinar coming up next week with a county in Florida that got hit hard by Hurricane Irma, talking about with FEMA, they had to produce social media records as part of their interaction with FEMA. So number one, again, social media archiving, it just gives you peace of mind that you have the records requests that you need, edited content, deleted content, hidden content, and beyond that, it just saves you time. Imagine fulfilling a records request where you had to go back and piece together a conversation on a network. And we find people say it could take hours and hours, whereas with archiving, you can do it in minutes. And again, we've talked about kind of assisting with internal investigations, cyberbullying, things like that. So here's a quick example. This is a school district in Washington. Some people in the community criticized the districts, essentially how they posted information. And again, I think this was around, if I remember right, it was around a weather event. And there were some changes to transportation. Actually, I'm saying that as it says it right here on the screen. So the weather event forced buses to use snow routes. So some parents basically complained about it. So then the people managing social media were able to go back and look at how they responded and promoted on and got the information out on social media, and then were able to respond both to the community and to their school officials. Okay. Secondly, so ensure compliance with public records laws. Secondly, protect your ability to moderate content in accordance with your policies. You want to feel freedom that you can use social media to its fullest, and you can moderate content without worrying that a parent's going to come back, threaten a lawsuit, and you're not going to have the records to defend yourself. So again, just because you have social media archiving doesn't mean that you might not get challenged by people, but it just gives you the comfort and the confidence that once you have a very solid social media policy in place for moderating content, you can just run with that because you've got the archiving to prove that you're consistent. So again, like here's an example. One of our customers, California, they had a Facebook post about a student-led movement to wear black on a specific day in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Got a lot of interaction, some of it positive, some of it negative. The school decided on some of the comments they needed to delete them. And again, because they were confident that they could be in compliance with their policy and they had the records to back them up. So again, in practice, when you're reviewing moderated content, you just want to make sure, if you don't have an archiving system right now, just be really careful. We recognize not everybody has that. And so just make sure you're consistent with your policy. Okay, and then finally, the third area of benefit, centralizing oversight of social media throughout your school district. And again, this is something that is really, I think, kind of unique to school districts. So what typically happens, we start talking to school district and they say, oh, we know what's going on with the district page. We kind of know what's going on with the school pages. At least we know who we would go to kind of get the information. And then we have very little to no idea of what's going on with all these other pages that the schools have that aren't there, that maybe a club page, sports page. So what social media archiving does is it centralizes that. So if you're the central communicator in your school district, you can have access to all of those accounts. Everybody still manages them independently, but you basically register accounts, really easy to do, really quick. You know what's active, you know who owns it. So if something gets posted that's inappropriate and a parent complains about it, you can very quickly go, oh, that was the Club X page at this school. So-and-so manages that. Let me reach out to them. You can ensure all the social media accounts are retaining records or in compliance with open records regulations. So again, part of the issue is it's not just enough for your district page to be in compliance. You need to make sure your school pages are also in compliance. And again, making sure everybody's following policy and that you have the info you need for internal investigations. Because frankly, most of the action or activity throughout your school district is happening on the school pages. Again, the district pages have some really, really important functions, but a lot of times the really the stuff where there's potential for controversy is happening in a decentralized way on the school pages. This is an example. We actually did a webinar it's about 6 weeks ago with Highline Public Schools outside Seattle, and they talked about one of the reasons that they decided to start archiving was centralizing oversight, and they created a roadmap for registering 100 accounts. And one of the things they did is they created a template registration form. We'll send a link out to that. They've given us permission to post that on our site, and we've had a lot of requests for that. We'll include that in the follow-up email. And again, just even separate from archiving, this is a great way that you can sort of wrap your arms around all of the pages in your district. So ultimately, social media archiving, it can be quick win. You don't have to get IT involved. Like, this is not a major IT project. There's a lot of things school districts do that are big IT projects. You got to get a lot of people involved. That's not this. Now, typically IT, or a lot of times IT will want to know about it, sign off on it. Oftentimes it's their budget that it comes out of. But this is a cloud-based solution. Essentially, all you do is connect your social media accounts through our, you connect them to our system. It can be set up in 20 minutes, and it's affordable. So what we tell people, a lot of times people ask, well, what's pricing? And I say two things. Number one, it's on our website. We're very transparent. It's basically how many records you're generating. And number two, it's priced to fit into your discretionary budget. So 90% of organizations are going to be under $5,000. Again, like, there's some really large school systems that are going to end up over than that. But for most places, it's going to end up being kind of $3,500 to $5,000 a year annual subscription. And again, unless you're somebody that's got like this massive social media presence. So in summary, social media, it's a vital part of your communications. Your social media does create public records. Again, not everything on social media is public record, but a lot of it is. And you need to have a plan to archive your records and respond to all kinds of records requests. So I want to say one thing, and then we'll get to some Q&A. If you're curious to see what your school district's archive look like, we actually have a feature on our site. You can go to the home page, you put your email in, and then it takes you to a page on Twitter where you just authenticate your Twitter. And basically what it does is it sets you up with what we call Sample Your Archive, and you can then see your records in action. So you'll see your historic records going back a certain period of time, about 6 months. Moving forward, you'll see revisions to content and deleted records. So you won't see the revisions to content in the past because obviously the archiving wasn't set up, but moving forward you will. And again, there's no obligation. This is purely just, we want to give people an opportunity to see what their archive looks like. So again, and we'll include a link to this in the follow-up email. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. And so why don't we take a second, and again, on the right-hand side, you'll see a tab. It's about, I don't know, the 5th one down that says questions. Just open that up, type in your question, and just submit it. And then I'll start answering some of the ones that are here. Okay, so we had a question from Harold. If you clearly state that your district's social media presence is to communicate the positive events of the district, and any negative communications posted will be removed, does this free you of the liability? So great question. So first thing we always say is we're not lawyers. So we really encourage everyone to, of course, get guidance from your school attorneys. That being said, what we're seeing around the country from court cases is that could get you into trouble. Because again, it's this First Amendment issue that people have the First Amendment right to post comments. And again, it gets into you guys can probably remind me of the court case like in the 70s for schools. Essentially, it can't be disruptive. And anyway, so there's kind of that line around disruption, but just posting, hey, I don't like how you did this particular event. I think you'd get into trouble with that. But again, talk to your school attorney about that. I like the idea that you have this clearly stated policy. I think that's a big plus. Okay, from Kevin, does Archive Social also assist us in managing posts such as, say, Hootsuite? Not only are we interested in being compliant with OPRA, so for those of you who don't know, OPRA in certain states, essentially it's your Public Records Act, archiving, et cetera, but we like an easy way to send out posts across all our social platforms. Can we schedule out posts? Is this simply monitoring? This is simply the archiving aspect, so we don't do what a Hootsuite or a Sprout Social does. And likewise, they don't do the archiving piece. Okay, so from Tim, there's always somebody that throws the tough question in. So Tim asks, are educators' private social media pages open to public records laws? So I'm going to really quickly show a slide here about a case recently in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. So this is from August. It's not a school book. It's not a school district page, but it's an interesting example of a state which had previously not, frankly, had a lot of guidance around social media and public records. And this court case, I think, has really opened things up and provided clarification. And here's what happened. Chambersburg received records requests for the mayor's personal Facebook page. And you can see the Facebook page here. And actually, there's a headline that goes across it, that official Facebook post. That's actually a news article. But if you look above and below, above, you see the mayor there in front of the city emblem on the top left, meeting with someone. You see on the top right, with the two flags, you see, again, the city's emblem. It is, on the right, in terms of his description, public figure in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, this was clearly a private page being used to conduct public business. And what was posted on it, there was no doubt about it. Now, what happened was the city said, hey, not only did we not create this page, we don't administer it, so we don't have to fulfill this request. And ultimately, the Pennsylvania Open Records Office ruled that this was immaterial, and they did have to supply material on the Facebook page, including deleted records, which again, they were going to have trouble providing because they hadn't been archiving. But the reason they ruled it was immaterial, the city's official web page linked to the account. So again, if you went to the web page, they would link to the mayor's private Facebook. The mayor on the page identified himself as a public official, and the mayor discussed public business on this. So, and this is consistent with what we've seen around the country, which is this, and again, we're not lawyers, but if you have an official, and again, and I'm going to talk about teachers, I want to separate out teachers and more sort of prominent officials, but like, let's say you have a superintendent, school board member, if they're conducting public business or talking about public business on their Facebook page, there's a very good chance that's going to be considered public record. Again, we're not lawyers, so you'd want to talk to your attorney, but that's what we're seeing around the country. Now, here's the other big issue for schools, and it's around teachers' private Facebook pages. And what I would say there, and I'm not sure, Tim, if you meant more teachers versus public officials there, I think teachers are a really difficult issue. What we're seeing is that more and more schools are encouraging students or teachers to have a hard wall between their private social media pages and any activity related to their teaching job. So again, like if I am a teacher, there are so many different tools that your district is giving student or teachers to communicate with their students, that they should not be using their private Facebook page, because that creates a whole can of worms. And there's all kinds of things, like you don't want your teachers interacting one-on-one with students, or what we're finding more and more, I shouldn't say you don't want, more and more we're seeing school districts are saying as a matter of policy, because of all of the sexual abuse, all of these types of situations that are coming up, we don't want a teacher on their private Facebook page messaging students, et cetera. So anyway, so all of that to say, there's kind of two issues with teachers. One is a policy issue, and whether or not you want teachers doing stuff on their private Facebook that relates to their job, and or just using the other tools, Blackboard, et cetera, that you've already given them. And then secondly is just this issue of what actually constitutes public record. And I just think that's trickier with teachers. I mean, teachers do things all the time in their classroom with handouts. Teachers give classrooms a handout. Is that public record? Well, we've heard a lot of lawyers say, no, that's not public record. So again, it depends on the content. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to say it's a complicated issue, but great question. Thanks, Tim. So Victoria, you might have answered this. Will this video be archived for sharing with others? Yes. So we will send out a follow-up that includes a link to a page that has this webinar recording, the resources that were mentioned, like the policy template, comment moderation guide. We'll have a link to the state laws for your page, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely. We'll do two more here, or actually probably just one more. So from Tracy, what happens if you can't provide deleted, hidden, modified content, any legal ramifications? This is state by state. Most states have publicly stated or have stated somewhere what their fines are for not being able to provide records. So that would be the issue. There might not be a consequence every time that, like, if you can't get every single deleted, hidden, modified content, so we're not trying to say that, but just about every state says you have these public records obligations, and if you cannot fulfill those, there is a fine and a penalty for that. And again, that's just from the state. There could potentially be the legal, the lawsuit, and usually it ends up being a settlement from people in the public. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So again, thanks a lot again. Keep an eye out. We're trying to pick up the pace on these webinars. Typically, we try to have a school district, like I mentioned, Highline from Seattle, have a school district present. So we'll be emailing out about the next one with that. Again, if you want to see what your archive looks like, go online. And if you have any particular questions, you can either respond to the follow-up email or you can just send me a note here. Thanks a lot again. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.